if a woman is having trouble in a workplace, be her friend.
Exude Human Capital hosts Hold On, Let Me Close My Door, bringing real HR stories from real professionals with real solutions to you. Join us as we navigate the ever-changing workplace with Allison DeFlorio, co-founder and managing partner, Exude Human Capital, and special guests. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Hold On, Let Me Close My Door. For those of you who've listened before, you know that this is a podcast about real issues that are happening in the workplace and what individuals can do, what employers can do, what business leaders and HR professionals can do to address them. I'm Allison DeFlorio, and I am host of today's episode. And I'm so thrilled and honored to have with me today Yvonne Wolf, founder and chief collaborator at Your Talent Matters. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Allison. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm glad the door is closed.
You know, Yvonne, when we spoke about this, we launched this podcast last year on International Women's Day. And this podcast will air on International Women's Day 2024. And I couldn't think of a better topic and a more appropriate individual to share her insights on the topic today. And our topic today is Sister, I Gotcha.
Yes.
You and I have had a number of conversations about women supporting women in the workplace. And Yvonne, you know, I know I'll give you a moment to share your background and your experience as a woman in business. But for our listeners, Yvonne has served in leadership roles, in CHRO roles, in a variety of businesses, as she says, just about anything but government. So I know there's pharma, financial services, hospitality, some high-profile nonprofit organizations. Yvonne, can you share a little bit about your background and your experience as a woman in business?
Yes, yes. And I'll be brief. The interesting thing is I'm a girl that grew up with brothers. So I think that's very relevant in this conversation. And then, you know, I entered into the world of business as a banker. And, you know, I always kind of expected to have challenges from guys because I had been sort of introduced to that. But my career moved really quickly. And then when I really reflect back, so I'm a 4-time chief people officer, as you mentioned, and I've also been head of talent practices. And the other day, about a year ago, I decided to leave a very high profile nonprofit chief people officer. Well, actually, it was chief people and culture officer, and really launched my own business because I decided that I could have a better conversation about some of the things I think we need to do to create a better workplace for all. So that's why I launched Your Talent Matters. A couple of other key highlights of my career is that it's been absolutely global. I've probably worked in the global space for over 20 years and even spent some time living in and working in Africa, which really helped me broaden my cultural dexterity. So I think that's another key piece. So when I talk about women and how women have shown up in my life and in my career, I'm actually taking a global lens to it. Like when I think about, you know, who have been allies and who have not been allies. The sad part, you know, is that it has been overwhelmingly women who have been non-allies and overwhelmingly men who have been allies. And yeah. So, and it wasn't anything I expected. I want to highlight my HR career really got strong at Pepsi. I'll just go ahead and name that one because at Pepsi, and this was a long time ago, so if you look at my bio, it probably doesn't even show up, but it was the first time I was really kind of a business partner. And I met this incredible woman named Natalie Peterman. And Pepsi had brought her in to do some like diversity work, if you will. And she brought all the women together, and she was like, don't lose your power. Pepsi even had me meet with a coach. Her name was Deborah Benton. She wrote a book called Lions Don't Need to Roar. And she talked about, leaning into your femininity. And she said, look, you can touch somebody on the arm and it's okay, but a man can't do it. I mean, she was amazing. And it was like, Queen, don't lose your crown. So if you think about this, is like 30 years ago, and this is what I was introduced. So then I'm working with this paradigm through the rest of my career that, sister, you have my back, because we got this club. We can do this. And when I look at the fact that 56% of workers in the US are women.
Yes.
And when you have conversations about how many are in C-suites and things like that, you have to wonder a little bit about what happens along the way. And I'll shut up now. My theory is it's not just the behavior of men.
I so appreciate that overview, and I'm even more excited about the conversation that we're about to have. And you're right, it's about 57% is what they're saying in 2024 it represents women in the workplace. Interestingly, it's about 10%, little over 10% of women that identify as leaders of large firms, and about 32% of women who are in leadership roles, and they're defining leadership role as director and above. So there still is a lot of work there to do. You alluded to a bit about your experience and some of the women who helped you along the way, but you also mentioned that men helped you along the way. So when we think about these numbers, what do you think about why women are only represented at 10% at CEO levels and 30% or so at leader and above levels?
Yeah. Well, first of all, one of my areas, I have 3 areas of specialty, if you will. One is around leadership, the other is around org design, and the other is around culture. And my baby is leadership. So I was personally trained by Stephen Drotter, who wrote the book, The Leadership Pipeline, and coined the phrase. And he's been a 20-plus year mentor. So there you go. Once again, there's a guy, right? But what he taught me in this space is phenomenal. So to answer your question, we often would look at the outcomes. We'd say, all right, what is it about the system that has not produced this pipeline of leadership? And I've done this a lot in my career, examined within the organizations. Often there are the organizational factors like, certainly some biases about what a leader looks like, which skew masculine. So I'm going to say that's a real thing. But there's also something about the roles that women play. Like women are often put into jobs that don't necessarily lead to P&L. And so even in that statistic that you talked about, you've got, probably getting into how many CHROs are there. So I bet that number is predominantly CHRO, and maybe some other functions that are more not considered P&L or revenue generating, which is usually the pipeline to, a leadership role or CEO role. And then there's that third category. There's a wonderful study that I came across a couple of years ago called The Tallest Poppy. And it actually is an international study. And it talked about how women aren't making it to the top because they're cut along the way. And I love that language, cutting.
I love that. Yes.
And the cutting that they described, I would just put in the category of sabotager. Like, a female gets into a role and then someone else starts creating this narrative, this false narrative about them. Oh, I don't really like working with her. She's a little, I just can't put my finger on it. So it's this, and that is uniquely, as I have witnessed in my professional career, that is uniquely the tool of women. Men tend to, when they don't like you, they go after your work. Women, when they don't like you, they go after your reputation. And when you weave a narrative about somebody, it also undermines their performance or the perception of their performance. And I've seen that game so much in my career. I've witnessed it and I've personally experienced it.
so interesting. And, to support that, I read a statistic recently that said 66% of women receive negative feedback on their personal style compared to 1% of men in this study, which is a pretty dramatic difference and supports some of the narrative that you were talking about that can be created. And also, you're correct, it's about 70% of women in leadership roles are in the HR space. I had never heard it described the way you described, as though it's not the P&L track, if you will. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Now, personally, I would argue that a CHRO is probably your best CEO, but that's why I love the space, right? I mean, when you think about the non-tangible value of a company, it's overwhelmingly, or the value of a company is overwhelmingly non-tangible, and that non-tangibility is overwhelmingly human capital. So really, a CEO only has a couple of tools, and 80% of it is about people. So we actually argue that, and I'm a CHRO who started out as a banker, so I understand the revenue generating part, and they've always done that. But there's another point I wanted to jump to, which was, so if you think about if 70% of female leaders are, or CHROs are 70% female, I'm not sure what that stat is, who is creating the practices? Who's creating the talent reviews? Who's creating the conversations that are either promoting people or undermining people? And once again, I have witnessed in my career, and I'm sorry, clutch my pearls, right? There's probably some CHROs listening that are going to say, she is not going to say that. But HR can often be the worst function for enabling behavior that undermines people of color at work and women at work. And my theory there is because it's tied to their desire to be connected to power. In order to be the best friend of the CEO, sometimes you have to go along with their agenda, even if their agenda isn't right. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not that kind of CHRO, and that's why some of my stints are a little more short-lived, because I believe in courage and advocacy and truth. Employee advocacy and truth and equity, those kind of things are rooted in my values. And I'm not criticizing, because I get it. It's hard to have a long season as a truth teller in an organization when the CEO doesn't have the organization's best interest at heart. Yeah.
I feel like I have seen this in play, in practice, where perhaps, and again, this is not to offend any CHROs out there or directors of HR who may be listening, but initially there's courage, initially there's advocacy, and then the doors close so many times, or the no signal is given so many times, that at a certain point someone says, well, if I'm to survive here, then I'm just going to have to make it happen for the business. Have you seen that as a career?
Yes, a lot. And actually, so I spend a little bit of time talking to boards now. I actually think boards should pay more attention to who the CHRO is. And I think if that CHRO has more cover, they're more likely, they could lean into their courage. But if you just, again, remember, I'm an org designer by training, just look at how it's designed. If you've got the CHRO is positioned to be the confidant of the CEO, and the CEO, whether or not the CEO likes working with them is a big part of it. Unless you have a very enlightened CEO, such as yourself, Allison, you're probably not going to have people around you who are truth tellers, right? And so the CHRO sometimes, and some of these jobs can be really cushy. I mean, I was making $500,000 in my 40s, and it was nice, it's cushy, it's easy to say, but I decided, I could have the money, but if I lose my soul, it's not worth it. And I'm one of those people that just looked at too many of the employees and said, they're counting on me to fight for them. And so I think in order for CHROs or HR leaders, in order to do the kind of work that they need to do in organizations, especially if the C-suite isn't necessarily focused on employees, is for the board to ask questions, get to know, give that person some air cover. Much like a board spends one-on-one time with CFOs, I think they should spend one-on-one time with CHROs.
Very interesting observation and advice. So I appreciate hearing kind of your take on the systemic issues that may be built into the way an organization is designed or business processes and policies are designed. What is it in your observation? Why is it that women themselves don't always appear to support other women the way that we see men do? You always hear the old boys clubs, things like that. But in your experience, and what have you learned and what have you seen, and has it changed?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question. And I'll be honest with you, I'm still in discovery mode because I'm still sitting there just blown away when women aren't supporting women. I can't, I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you I'm surprised every time. And I can give you some really personal stories too, if you want to go there. But, and so my observations are based on my personal stories. And then I also, in preparation for this, decided to call my assistant ChatGPT to ask why. It's really in ChatGPT was pretty good. And then I've just been combing, materials and things like that. I read a wonderful article in Chief. Sally, oh my gosh, I'm not getting her last name correctly. She was a finance leader. She's amazing. Her name is Sally. And one theory she offered up is that a lot of women who are in leadership right now are pre-Title IX. And so they didn't really play team sports. And
how interesting.
yeah, I thought that was a really interesting point. Men have always, the good old boy club is something that has been ingrained in them forever. I mean, I even started a Cub Scout troop when I had my son, and I learned that they do everything differently. I got fired as the Cub Scouts troop. They were like, no, you were like cheating. You're not letting them be who they are. And this is a very, sort of stereotypical gender kind of idea, but boys usually do grow up in this sense of, let's play on this team together. They are horrible bullies, don't get me wrong. They do egregious kinds of things, but for the most part, boys support boys, right? Whereas girls aren't necessarily socialized that way. It's a very individualistic model. It's a very nurturing and supportive model, but it's not necessarily about that person. You need that person in order to get things done that you want to get done, is the theory that Sally brought up. I would just throw on top of that, I think as you move up in corporations, the scarcity mentality gets greater, right?
Mm-hmm.
The risks are higher. These are big paying jobs. You're the only one that that's making that kind of money. You're the only one in the room, so the whole kind of competition thing could take over, which is natural for lots of people. And then I'm going to add on one more of my theory and my own personal experience. Sometimes women are easy targets. Like, I could take her down a lot quicker than I could take him down. So if you,
I have to hear a personal story. Now, if you can share one, and you can leave the names of we'll protect the innocent by leaving the names out. But how has this influenced you personally? What's your stories?
So I remember going to work for, it was after, so I should offer another piece. There's a whole nother podcast I think we should do called C-Suite Cesspool, because that's what I discovered that people in the C-suite aren't necessarily amazing. So it was after one of my first CHRO stints, and the CEO wanted me to promote his girlfriend to be his backfill. And it was just horrible. And I was just so shaken. All my confidence, my naivete, I was real early in my career. So this one female CEO took me into her organization to do consulting work. So that's when I first started doing consulting work. And because I was close friends with her, we agreed that I didn't want to, in her organization, kind of let people know, yes, she's my friend, right? So I went to work. I reported to someone underneath, someone who reported to her. And this woman literally sabotaged my relationship with the CEO who I'd already known. I'd known her forever and everything. And to be perfectly honest, they asked me to leave, right? And it was like devastating. And what's really interesting about this story is she has resurfaced because she wants to write an article about this very issue. Because it turns out this same woman went after her. Undermined her with the board and everything. So the interesting thing is once that evil is in, like, she's not going to just take one down. She's going to take everybody down. And there was also an element of incompetence around her. So and so a lot of times I should even add that to the formula. I see this behavior more so in women who aren't skilled, who have some element of insecurity and incompetence. So they're the scary ones. So that's why I tell people now when I'm coaching people, when they start talking about people around them, I want them to identify the insecure and the incompetent. Because more dangerous ones than the highly competent ones or the confident ones. If you can get that combination, it's frightening because how that person will survive will not necessarily be in your best interest. So I've learned in my life to look for those people, and to run. But I'll tell you, I had a recent experience as a CHRO, and a woman had applied for my job. I've had that a couple of times too, where a woman in my team who ultimately ended up reporting to me had applied for the role and didn't get it. And I was so naive, Allison, because this woman was she's a Black woman, and I'm thinking, oh, how exciting! I'm going to develop her. I'm going to coach her so that when I'm gone, she does have the job. But she was incompetent and insecure. And I will just tell you, it was living hell having her on my team.
Interesting.
And the CEO didn't want to let her go and everybody recognized how divisive she was, but didn't want to let her go. And ultimately, I decided I couldn't be in that environment, in that org, because of a lot of sabotaging behavior, twisting my words, taking pieces of my strategy and presenting them as her own, all the worst behavior on the planet. And also being in a system that said, no, you can't touch her. And that just, for me, wasn't sustainable. Yeah.
And that's an interesting point that I think we see in organizations, and this isn't necessarily only women. This could be men as well, where you have that individual who is a difficult individual, perpetually being challenging with others, but yet an unwillingness of the organization to address the behavior. And again, I think it spans all genders.
Yes.
What do you recommend to organizations to begin to address those kinds of issues and to build an environment? And we can focus specifically on women for the purposes of this podcast to encourage an environment where women can be supportive of one.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, first of all the nice thing is when you go after marginalized communities, you actually improve the environment for all. That's the interesting part about DEI that people aren't talking about. If you make it work for those that it does not work for, those are the words of Roosevelt Thomas, the founder of the word diversity, you will improve the system for all. So I would start with having practices that are rooted in equity, fairness, democratize development, make sure everybody has access to it. So make sure your systems are designed to make sure everybody wins and you remove bias and equities in there and everything like that. So that's at the organizational level. I think leaders could look for people and surround themselves with people on their team to tell them the truth. And my mother told me as a child, when somebody came to tell me about what somebody else said about me, my mother would always say, I think you should ask that person why they're telling you that.
Yeah.
So leaders
said something similar. Yes.
So leaders should dig in a little more and go, why are you telling me that Yvonne is somebody you don't want to work with? What are you doing in that? What is happening in that relationship? What's your part? What's your role? So just be a little more discriminating and celebrate people when they lift other people up. So make that part of your culture. Some of the best, I'll tell you a really quick story. I want to tell you a story about some female relationships that work. I was working for a really well-known consulting practice, and it was all virtual because it was 2020, and this group of about 6 of us women kind of found each other in the Zoom room, and we started every time we were in a room, we would just celebrate. Like, oh, I love that point Michaela just made. Oh, can I reinforce that point that Janet just made? Well, I heard Camille had a point she wanted to make, and I just want to lift it up. So we started doing that. And it was so incredible. And to this day, we actually have a group chat we call Queens. And we still do that. We don't work for the same organization. All of us have been promoted and moved on and doing bigger and better things. And we even paid to meet on our own dime. We came together in Boston and rented an Airbnb and hung out for the weekend. So now we even have Queensgiving and everything like that. So I do know amazing women who have done that. The reason I'm in front of you is I'm going to call her out. Stephanie LaPlante, who is a really dear, I met her at GSK, which is the company we worked for together. And we were allies in the room. We would share things. I'd say, hey, I got this, situation. Can you tell me? And she'd share. She said, oh, I worked on that 8 years ago. Here's my files. And now today we're just some of the closest friends. And she knew when I started my consulting practice that I wanted to get in and affiliate with some people that were already doing great work. And she introduced me to you. So there are great stories like that as well. But the last thing, to answer your question a really long-winded way, the thing that I think is most important is our own individual behavior. So I hope somebody's listening to this podcast and is going to decide, I'm not going to be that girl. I'm not going to be that girl who sees other women as easy targets, that sees women as competition. Yes, that I love what you said. That is not uniquely the mentality of the gender of females. But if just 40% of us said, I'm not going to take out another girl, because by the time she gets where she got, she has made sacrifices. She's worked twice as hard. She has done things. She deserves a breath, a relief, a support, a massage, a spa treatment. Like, she does not deserve us to come at her in the most vigorous and vicious way. So I actually developed a framework that with another male, one of my mentors, it's called Be a Rhodium Colleague. So, the whole concept of it's built on the principle of the golden rule. So, a golden colleague is, you're the colleague that everybody that you want others to be, right? So the silver is you're a good colleague. You're doing your thing. Gold is you're the kind that you think people, that you want for yourself. And then the platinum is where you're focused on, trying to be the colleague that other people need you to do, sharing materials, things like that. But the rhodium, which is the rarest metal of all, is about lifting up, advocacy, elevating. When you're in the room, if you're the only one in the room, say, we need more chairs because I need somebody else in here with me. Expand the pie. You don't have, it's not fighting over the pie. That's what a rhodium does. Create space.
I love that. And I just wrote that down and will spread the word. You mentioned a couple of things that organizations and individuals can do, that taking note of being the only in a room or in a conversation and stepping up and saying, who's not here that should be here is something. And I've even read that even where women tend to sit at tables in meetings can influence how they are included in a conversation. So sitting at the center of a table or at the end of the table instead of off to a side makes a big difference. You also talked about celebrating women's accomplishments with your Queens group. That's another strategy that I think women would really benefit women who want to openly support other women in meetings to be able to say, Yvonne, I love what you just said. And I believe that that has a lot of value into this conversation. Can you share a little bit more about that? Or even calling out the woman who may, has a good idea, but may not be quite perhaps confident enough to share that idea. What are some other strategies that women as the individual can demonstrate in a workplace to show their support of other women?
Yes. Actually, I love what you just the illustration that you just made, and I think just be mentors and sponsors. Be allies, mentors, and sponsors. I mean, really, when I am in a room with other women, I immediately kind of gravitate to them. I have a little, again, Natalie Prettyman got into my brain 30 years ago, and she hasn't let it go. And then I just, I start talking to them. I smile at them in a room to let them know, yeah, they matter. And I have quite a few women that I've taken on as mentors, mentees. And I think here's another thing that I'm noticing right now, which is why I'm really glad we're having this conversation. When Dr. Gay at Harvard, decided to resign, I did a post when I talked about, at the time, I didn't know everything about what was happening there and the conspiracy that was, the real concerted effort that some people engaged in, including a female senator, to just take her down and to make up a narrative about her. And, I won't get into all of that right now. But the point is, I posted this, reposted an article because I believe in elevating voices, right? So I reposted an article and I wrote on the top that some people can fail up and others only one chance. And I will say I find that a lot in the workplace for people of color and women, that and Black people in particular, that there's like zero tolerance for error. We're seeing that right now in another state that I won't really mention, but zero tolerance. But what was interesting, when I posted that post, I had over 22,000 impressions in just a matter of days. And LinkedIn considers it viral if it gets to 1,000 impressions. And what's important to note is I only have 5,000 followers. So like these are so what happened is people were spreading it to other people. But then other people started getting in the DM, and there were some really sad stories. And I started reaching out to the women and stuff that were writing in there that said, thank you for saying this is so true. And so I started saying, tell me your story. And so I think the other thing that we can do is, if a woman is having trouble in a workplace, be her friend. Ask her what's really going on here. You're not, so back to your title, sister, I got your back. Sometimes she just needs somebody to listen to. Maybe she needs a coach. Maybe she needs an ally. Maybe she just needs a shoulder to cry on. But let's when we see, instead of going, oh my God, yes, she's a problem, like ask other questions. What is really happening for her, and how can I be a friend for her right now? And again, it might just be listening, because you might not be able to do anything else. You might not have a platform to let her voice be heard, or you might not be able to promote her, or whatever the case may be. So mentoring, sponsoring, and just plain old good old girlfriend listening.
I love that. And I'm going to add one more to your list, and I'm going to say connecting, and I'm going to shout out to Stephanie LaPlante, who introduced us. And that was just through someone I'd been connected to, and Stephanie and I had a wonderful conversation. And she said, there's someone I think I really would like to introduce you to. And that's how I got connected to you, Yvonne. And I think women have to have that on their radar. Think about who would be helpful for this person, this wonderful person that I'm speaking to. Who can I connect them with so they can share their story or learn something or or just be connected to another wonderful woman. So I'm going to add that one into your list.
Oh my gosh, that's probably one of the best. So thank you for saying that. That probably is. And just lastly, check our behavior. Like, look yourself in the mirror. Like, if you find yourself in a meeting feeling some kind of negative energy towards somebody, really check yourself. What is happening right now? Why am I not loving what she's saying? Why am I hating what she's wearing? Why am I criticizing her hair or whatever negative thoughts are going on in your mind? Just check yourself, because you may have been socialized to go after her. And I think it's the lack of self-awareness that really is the problem. Mm-hmm.
Yvonne, I would love for you said so many wonderful things in this conversation, but as a parting gift to the listeners, what are your 3 best pieces of advice to be a woman who is supporting other women?
Yeah. There's a great book that was just written, and Deepa is her first name. It's called The First Few and the Only. And I would say that book has quite a few great nuggets about showing up in the workplace as a woman, and especially as a woman of color. And I think what I would ask, and your listeners are probably predominantly, non-Black, I would guess. So my one piece of my advice would be, so number one, check your behavior. Who are you? And I have another quote where I say, how about you be a safe colleague at work? Someone's asked me, are workplaces safe for people of color and women and things like that? And I said, no, but how about you be a safe person to work with? Be a rhodium colleague. Or just at least be platinum. Like, you don't even have to get the rhodium. Just be platinum. Show up for her the way she needs you to. And guess what? Even in that space, you'll create an environment that works for all. Men are not enemies. We need them in the fight. We need everybody. We need every bit of talent. And the problem is you don't even have enough white men to fill all the jobs that we're going to need. So we got to make space for everybody to play. So check your behavior, and be a safe colleague at work. I like what you said about, find somebody to connect with and to elevate. So find someone to connect with and always be there for her. I want to close with one of my favorite other women, Julie Castro Abrams, that has an organization called How Women Lead. And she is a credo. So I would ask everybody to just Google How Women Lead. The credo comes right up. But she talks about being being fierce and unabashedly courageous. So I do think we need to do that. But she says, lift her up. If she posts an article, repost it, elevate the voices. And the example that you gave too earlier about, if a woman's in the room and you're like, elevate her ideas, or if she's not being included, so include. So, to kind of try to summarize these 3 ideas, it's 1, check your behavior, be that safe person. 2, connect. I love your idea, and make connections for other people, for other women. And thirdly, really look for those opportunities to lift her up. Follow Julie Castro Abrams' credo.
Yvonne Wolf, I just want to thank you on behalf of everyone in our community for taking your time and your expertise and your wisdom and sharing that with our listeners. And for all of you listening there, I just pulled up the credo that Yvonne was speaking about, and I'd love to end this conversation just reminding everyone to be fierce advocates for each other, say yes to helping each other, be unabashedly visible, and reinforce her voice. I thank you. I thank everyone and wish everyone a wonderful International Women's Day. Thank you for listening to Hold On, Let Me Close My Door. Until next time.